Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Leonie-Ruth. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Andy.
I'm so delighted that you're here. We are hours apart. Tell everybody your age and where you hail from.
I'm 68 years of age and I'm an Australian. I live in Eastern Australia in actually quite a cool part. So I've got the wood fire stove burning this morning because we're in winter and it's 7 a.m. in the morning. So very different place and time to you and
That's
perhaps
right.
many of your listeners.
And listeners, it's 5 p.m. here in Boston, and I'm so excited to have Leonie-Ruth on the show. We're going to dive into some wonderful conversations. Her story and her background is so profound. Leonie-Ruth, give us a flavor of where you've been and what you've been up to this point in your life. I know that's a lot of decades to cover, but you've got some pretty wonderful adventures that you've had along the way.
I have indeed. So, in my 20s and 30s, I had the opportunity to live in many places in the world, including Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Tanzania in East Africa. And that was because my husband was an anthropologist. So, I had not only an opportunity to live in those places, but in a very different way to many other people. And I learnt Indonesian, which is quite closely related to Malay. So when I went to Malaysia, I understood a lot of the language there. And when I was in East Africa, I learnt Swahili as well. So that was in my earlier years. And then I had two children, and I, in fact, became an Indonesian teacher. So I was in the education system teaching from preschool age 4 through to 16-year-olds Indonesian language and culture. And I did that for some time. And then in my mid 40s, I moved over to higher education and I ran a facility at the University of Canberra called the Spiritual Meeting Place, which was a multi-faith chaplaincy. And that was a wonderful experience. I did a lot of work with international students, introducing events a lot around campus that were significant for that from their cultural background so that they felt comfortable. So we did all sorts of things for Indian backgrounds like Diwali and Baha'i ceremonies and all sorts of things. And then I moved into the area, and feeds into where I am now, the area of mentoring for women at the university. And we had a very special program there, which was a group mentoring program, but there were also mentoring for senior women within the university. And I became very involved in that area. And through that, I got onto the board of the United Nations Women in Australia and was able to go over to New York to the Commission on the Status of Women on 3 different occasions and got involved in looking at the place and role and status of women around the world. So that leads me up to where I am now, which is doing Mentoring to Flourish, which works specifically with women, mentoring, as it says, mentoring to flourish.
Yes. And I want to thank you from my heart for doing so much for gender equality. You know, in all the conversations, whether you were teaching with your children or in Indonesian or any of the places and spaces you've been, I know from diving into your background that you've always made sure that women were being lifted up, right? And
Yeah,
empowered.
that's a beautiful way of saying it. Yeah, women supporting women, lifting women up. I particularly have a heart for that because I think systemically there's so many obstacles, no matter how bright, how clever, how talented. So I have done a lot of work encouraging young women in leadership and talking at young women's conferences and things like that. And that's one of the things I still have a big heart for, working with young women. But at this stage of my life, I'm also very aware that as an older woman myself, and older women in generally, we have the ingrained false story about age and what is expected of us. And I don't know about in America, but as from Australia, from by the time you get to about 50, you become invisible, absolutely invisible, and people just look through you when you're waiting in a store or wherever. So I have a strong sense of social justice. So there's a very strong part of me that's like, we need to change this story, and if not me, then who? So I'm sort of joining the voices of many men and women, changing the story about what it means to be an older person, what it means to have had this part of our journey behind us and how we can leverage from that and contribute and continue to grow and, as you say, glow.
That's right.
Quoting you on that one, Andy.
Well, I love that your background prepared you for this as a teacher, as a leader, to help people. And especially, I love that you're working intergenerationally with younger women as a role model for them, but giving them some of the courage, some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. Because I find that it's always a shock. I've worked with a lot of startup founders, and women within corporate America may have been succeeding relatively well, but when they actually launch their own business, for example, they find, wait, what? I can't get any money? What? Wait, they're always looking at me, well, what if everything goes wrong? Where they're asking the man, what happens if you win? What is this inequality that's happening? And so I love that you're giving voice to that and mentoring them, but also with what's going on as, and listeners, this is coming up in episode 13 with Sarah Hart. It's like a second women's movement. We are saying enough, just like we did in the late 60s and early 70s for the economic issues that we had then and many other women's rights issues. Now it's this, hello, you're treating older women like they are definitely out in the pasture, that they are invisible, they have no role or purpose, and we don't need you anymore. That has to stop. And I love that you and your background have beautifully been prepared to address this on a policy level, on a global level, and in a way that can reach more women and help them understand their own ageist beliefs, let alone what society's constantly telling them. When did you first experience this external ageism? And did you have any of your own internal ageism as you were,
Oh, look,
in
I'm
your
sure
50s?
this is one of the issues. We not only combat the external, but the internal ageist stories,
Right.
which is, yes, it's very difficult. I first experienced actually at a petrol station, waiting in line to pay my money, and a young woman stood up, came and stood next to me, and the guy serving just immediately spoke to her and served her, and I'm like, hello? And I went back, I was teaching at the time, I went back to my colleagues and I explained this, and some of the older women said to me, honey, this is what happened. I'm like, really? This is not good. So there was something that rose in me at age, about 45 it probably was. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a great scene out of that movie with Jane Fonda, TV series, HBO series. No, it was a Netflix series. Gracie and Frank and Gracie. I would get the names switched, but that's what happened. They were in a store and they couldn't get anybody to check them out
No.
because the focus was on the younger, more attractive. And we are a youth centered culture.
We are a youth-centered culture, indeed. And that's one of the things about decisions you make as you grow older, whether, for me, accepting the stage you are at in life is terribly important. And being able to accept that, in my case, my hair went grey very early. I did colour it for quite some time, but in my late 50s, I think it was, I had a very bad back and I could stand up or lie down. And this was for a number of weeks, months, and nothing much in between. And so I couldn't get to the hairdressers to sit for 2 hours to have my hair coloured. And so the grey started growing through. And my sister said to me, oh, your hair's quite a nice colour, you know. And so I thought, oh, so I went to hairdressers, and it was long at the time. I had it all cut off short so that there was just a little, and it was really quite pretty. And I thought, oh, well, I think I might stick with this. So I sort of was out and loud and proud, my grey hair, and it's continued to be silvery white. And I often get compliments from young women in the street say, oh, your hair colour's rocking it. I say, oh, thank you, sister. So I think
And
that's really important. One of the things that I personally have learned and believe very strongly is that we cannot, there's a difference between your chronological age and your biological age. And there's a difference between lifespan and health span. And if we are trying to fight our chronological age, we can't, the years go by, and why fight it anyway? It's actually a gift. There are many cultures and societies who value older people. Much the American, Australian, British, no, but other cultures where, you know, you have elders and eldership. So I think that's important to realize that we have a narrative that is instilled in us, which is a youth focus,
Right.
and but it is very unhelpful. And also take our eyes and our blinkers off and realize the industry that is around keeping us caged by our age, believing that we have to look a certain way, we have to look like we did when we were 30. I'm like, do you know what? It's okay. I don't mind having wrinkles. I earned them. This is a sign of a life well lived, you know. There's joy and sorrow and all sorts of things that happen in life, and wrinkles come because of that. And that's just fine by me too. And I know there's sisters out there that don't like that. Well, that's okay too. But for me, it's a really important thing to say, this is who I am. And let's look beyond the superficial. Let's look to the heart.
Right.
Let's look to the experience. Let's look to the wisdom. But also, let's look to the freedom. You know what? We get to this age and we don't care what people think about. I couldn't tiddly squat. I'm much more able to be my eccentric, quirky self now without worrying about what people think. You know, I'll wear crazy hats or whatever, and I just do it, you know.
Well, listeners, if you want to see Leonie-Ruth's gorgeous silver hair, you can just hop onto the YouTube channel and watch the videos. If you're on, Apple, wherever you're tuning in for podcast, Spotify, wherever, hop on over to my YouTube channel. Links are always in the show notes or under Ande Lyons to see that. And you bring up such a beautiful point. When people ask me, how have you benefited from launching this podcast? Don't be caged by your age. I quickly say, it has been the most liberating experience of my life. When I came out and decided to age out loud,
Yeah.
I also had to look myself in the mirror and say, hey, this is you look your age. This is wonderful. Meaning, so often people say, oh, you look great for your age, which means there's a look that you're not supposed to have. And when you get to the point where you, as Leonie-Ruth said, embrace your age, accept your age, it is so liberating and so freeing. All of a sudden, those, in my case, barnacles, brown spots, wrinkles, you name it, they're there. I look at them and go, yeah, of course they're there. I'm 67. This is great. And it's okay to age versus I spent years afraid. Oh, I've got to fix that. I got to take care of that. I can't be looking old. Well, what the heck is wrong with this looking, quote, old?
Well, you know what I think part of the answer to that is because we have the mentality that we are caged once we get to a certain age. And I know you've discussed this with all your guests, and I was listening to Judith's interview this morning very early on, and it struck me that, yes, we have these self-beliefs, but we get to a stage, and she called it the renaissance. And this is not what's been talked about. But as she said that, I thought, yes, that's what I've experienced. And if I may just dive a little bit into my recent history, during COVID, my mum came to live with us, and we live in the country on a couple of acres, and we actually had a really lovely COVID time, even though we had severe lockdowns here, because we had our 2 acres and her carers were still allowed to come in and visit. So I would make little tea parties for her and them because she wasn't able to go out for coffee. And so we were kind of like the center of the world. It was a brilliant time. But at the end of that, she became very ill and was hospitalized. And during that time, I had a stroke, which wasn't a very
Oh,
happy
I'm
thing at
so
all.
sorry,
And
Leonie-Ruth.
thank you. Yeah. And particularly because I have always taken great care of my health. I move my body. We eat from our garden. I cook from scratch, etc. I'm like, oh, I've had a stroke. Why me? But anyway, it was me, and it's one of those things in life that you just need to well, there you go. But in fact, I call it my stroke of luck because it was a very unusual stroke, and the whole right side of my body was affected, but not to the point that anyone else could see. It was an internal thing of tinglings and numbness and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. My speech wasn't affected. So looking at me, it didn't look as if I had a stroke, but to me, it was a wake-up call. Like, oh, okay, I've been living in a certain way, and my body has not been happy about that. So that was my big wake-up call, and I realized that I wanted to and needed to transform the relationship I had with myself and the way I did things. As a high
Yes.
achiever, I needed to change things. So when my mum was with me, I was the best carer in the world. Well, etc., etc. So now I'm on this path, and I had been coaching and mentoring. I hadn't stopped. I'd still had a few clients, which we did by Zoom and stuff during COVID. But I'd also, in the last 10 years, stepped up. We live in a property and we've been doing a permaculture. So we grow our own vegetables. We have an orchard. We've got ducks and chooks. And I was doing a lot in the garden. I've always loved landscape gardening. I've landscaped our 2 acres and created places of great beauty. And so I was very much involved in that, and the coaching and mentoring came because repeat clients would contact me and say, blah, blah, can you do me? And I'm sure I'll fit you in. Then I had a text from a woman who I had been coaching and who was actually working at the World Bank in Washington. And she said to me, are you still coaching? Because I'd like to refer a couple of people to you. And this was after my stroke. And I'm sitting there and I'm at my desk like this. And I go, oh, was it like this sort of like light bulb moment? Am I still coaching and mentoring? Good question. It was like a pivot point. I could say, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm too old, or I've just had a stroke or whatever. And there's something inside of me that rose up like a roaring lion, true to my name. And it was like, yes, I want to do this. So I emailed back and said, sure, I'm still doing that. And she referred the people to me. But at the same time, my son said to me, oh, well, Mum, if you're going to re-envisage your coach mentoring, you really need to get on LinkedIn. Well, I'd been on LinkedIn 15 years earlier, but really done nothing about it. And it was kind of at the time when you were only on LinkedIn if you were looking for work or that sort of thing. And so I go back in and yes, there's my LinkedIn account and a photo of me from 15 years ago. And I said to him, oh, we better take a photo right now, even though it's not professional, just stick something up now. And then I improved that one. And we got on and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what is happening here? So I sat with LinkedIn for a couple of weeks and I discovered that it is my place and I found my people. And I have had so much fun on LinkedIn. I have connected with women all over the world. I have got clients through LinkedIn. And the young women I work with say to me, you're really nailing it on LinkedIn. Can you help with us with LinkedIn? And I'm like, really? You're the digital natives? You know all about social media and I'm nailing it on LinkedIn? So it's really interesting. You just bring a bit of intelligence, a bit of observation, see what other people do. But I also want to say I bring my own values.
Right.
And this is another thing about being at the stage I'm at. And I want to really emphasize that life is full of stages. And for some people, for example, you are in a stage if you happen to be a parent, but that stage could be at 20, 30 or 40 these days. But the stage is still the same stage where you've got the joy of a young growing life that you're
Right.
responsible for, the happiness of that, but at the same time, sleep deprivation. So that's the stage you're dealing with. I'm now at that stage. I don't have those things, but I'm at the stage where my body is showing chronological age in some ways.
Right.
There are things that, I've had a stroke. There are things that I need to deal with. And I know that a lot of your other interviewees have talked about these things as well, that it's that accepting that this is part of the stage. So going back to my former point about the stroke and doing things differently, entering it into this stage and realizing that I have this wonderful thing ahead of me. Just like with young parents, you're struggling with lack of sleep, but you've got this wonderful journey where the messages that we're given is that once you get into 60, 65, heavens above, your journey's ended. There's nothing wonderful to look for. I want to say to listeners, there's so much wonderful to look forward to every single day. It's really exciting. Find your niche. Your niche might not be LinkedIn. Your niche might not be doing what I'm doing, which is mentoring and working in the garden and cooking from the vegetables that I pull out of the earth that morning. But whatever your niche is, there is wonderful things ahead of you.
There really are. And you were talking how you listened to Judith Kernick, which is episode 11, everyone. She talks about that having an energy portfolio.
Yeah,
What
I loved
is that
it.
what she calls it?
Yes,
It's
she did.
this, it's how you invest your time and energy, listeners. And this is what Leonie-Ruth has been talking about so brilliantly, in that, yes, you have wonderful things that you want to do, but you're going to perhaps pace yourself. You're going to outlay it in different ways than you might have at a younger age and stage. Yes?
Totally. And I want to encourage listeners. One of the false stories we're told is, oh, you're getting older, take it easy, slow down. But in fact, we know from the research that we actually, as we get into this stage, we actually need to move our bodies more. We need to engage our minds more. We need to have greater connections. Listeners might or may not be aware of a studies that been done in what's called known as the blue zones. Have you heard about the blue zones?
Yes,
Yeah. The only
absolutely.
reason they're called the blue zones was that they marked the zones on the map of the world with a blue pen. Just letting you know, there's no other connection to the color blue than that. How random is that? But that's okay. But in the blue zones, first of all, when they were studying them, we looked at what they were eating and said, oh, we must look at their diet, whatever. And then finally, we realized actually it's the fact that they are respected in their communities, they have a place and space and value, but they are connected with each other and intergenerationally.
Right.
Now, this is the big challenge that we have. This is the groundbreaking work we're doing. We're saying we need that connection. And it is often not easy to have a connection physically where you are because people's lives are really busy. They're out and about working, doing this and that. And I have found that through LinkedIn as a platform, that I have conversations almost on a daily basis through LinkedIn. We Zoom around the world about all sorts of things. And that degree of connection is incredibly enlivening. So that's a part of your energy portfolio. How do you get energized? You need connection. No matter who you are or what you are, if you don't have that connection, we don't have that energy. And the reason being is because it is a great falsehood that we need independence. What actually makes human beings is interdependence. And the American, Australian, British, the Western, the capitalist model of independence is a falsehood. And if this is the first time you've heard that, listeners, think really clearly about it. When we try to go it alone, we set ourselves up for so much extra
Pain,
stress,
suffering.
strain, pain,
Yes.
the whole lot of it. When we realize that interdependence is what we need, and that means two-way flow, it means collaboration, it means support, all of those things, then
All
we
of those things.
all grow. So what I talk about my work, when people say, what do you do? I say, I co-create and hold space for the regeneration and healing of soil, soul, and society. So the soil is connecting us to the earth and realizing that if we don't have a connection to nature, then we've lost the whole point about being put on earth, you know. We could have been put somewhere else, but we're here with the earth. If we don't have a connection and acceptance with ourselves, we're going nowhere pretty faster as well. And then once we have that connection with ourselves and a connection with nature, whether it's because we've got animals in the house or pot plants, or whether it's because we like to look out at the view or walk by the sea, whatever it is, once we have those two, we are much more available to connect appropriately with everybody else. So the three are intertwined together, which is why I have that great bit. People say, can't you know, cut that down? No, you got to have the three. And if you are living in a culture and a place which is very citified with a lot of air conditioning and creature comforts, part of who we are is actually designed to be slightly uncomfortable, to have a bit of weather happening to us. You know, you go out and it's raining. I go out and it's raining. People say, "Oh, it's raining." You're going out. Yeah, I don't shrink in the rain. It's okay. I don't, nor do I dissolve. It's okay. But you'll get wet. I may do, but I'll come home and I'll dry up. And you know what? That's okay. So yeah,
This
but
is, and listeners, yeah, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Leonie-Ruth just said, because she has this phenomenal platform that she calls the Pomegranate Circle. And her intention really is to co create and hold space for healing, transformation, and regeneration of soil, soul, and society so that we can all flourish. And what I mean, you've been talking about leading up to this, but what compelled you? Was it the stroke of luck that that helped you get
no,
that
most.
deeper understanding? Is it something you've always been working toward?
Do you know what? It was podcasts.
Yay.
I turned 60, and my niece came to visit, and she said, "Oh, Auntie Leonie-Ruth," she said, "I think you'd really like podcasts." And I'm like, "What a podcast?" And she got my phone and goes, "Beep, beep, 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 beep." She said, "Here, listen." And I start listening, and I'm like, "Oh, it was love at first listen." I just loved it. And so then I scrolled through and found podcasts that which really interest me, and I got my little headphones, and I'd go on long walks with the dog, or I'd be doing some domestic chores or
Or
whatever
weeding
it
the
was.
gardens.
Yeah, all of those things, and I could listen to podcasts. And I live in a small country town, and that's neither here nor there, except that I made a decision when I moved here that I wanted to actually had a simpler and slower lifestyle, which
Yeah.
meant not just racing back to the big city 45 minutes away to catch the latest great movie or whatever. I'm like, "Yep, you can do that if that really lights you up, but I actually want to explore something else about myself." And that's when I've always been a gardener, and having 2 acres to play with, as it were, I began to connect with the soil, and the more I connected, the more I flourished, the more I understood myself from observing the seasons and being part of the seasons and part of nature. And then when I connected to podcasts, I learnt some more, shall we say, about the theory of what was happening to me. So I did it experientially, and people like you have in the States a wonderful woman called Katie Bowman, who has a podcast called Move Your DNA, and she's a biomechanist, and she has some fantastic insights about the body and movement and the relationship to space and ourselves and how it impacts us and impacts society. And listening to her just blew me away. And it just went on and on with the podcast that I listened to. So being able to connect to some of the most cutting research and some of the greatest minds and hearts, will I say,
Right.
around the world just through podcasts, then I really took off. So I do really what other people think often is bizarre things. I do a lot of barefoot walking. I take my shoes off. I don't wear shoes around the house. I wear minimal shoes, which are shoes which don't have a heel. Ladies, if you're wedded to high heels, good luck to you. But having had a bad back, I have found that
Mhm.
going zero drop heel, wide toe box so your toes aren't squeezed, and having a flexible sole so you connect to the earth beneath you has transformed my life. So that's one of my secrets for my energy, actually, my barefoot walking and my barefoot. And if you're scared about doing it, started socks inside on your carpet, you know?
Leonie Ruth, can we just talk about that bit with the heels? I feel
Yeah,
like it's getting worse and worse, and we're turning into Barbie doll feet. And
yeah,
and I don't
yeah.
understand. I mean, I called them nose picker heels back in the day for myself, and I
I
and
love
I
it.
would
I haven't heard that one before.
I would certainly wear them for occasions, but of course, I came of age at a time when, when we took the trains, think of Meg Ryan, Sleepless in Seattle, there we were with
Yeah,
our sneakers. We didn't wear our heels. And every time I turn around, there's another woman on the stage, and I'm looking at her going, how and why are you doing that to your whole body? Who are
yeah.
these fashion people who have told us that's what we, and I know listeners, this is a little segue on the ageism, but seriously, you know what I'm talking about. Why has that become so revered and important, and how are we getting indoctrinated? And it's also a phenomenal example of being indoctrinated to
It
wear
is being
shoes that no
indoctrinated.
man would wear except
Well,
maybe the
and
dancers.
it's so much, might I say, a part of what is expected of so-called professional attire for women. And I'm like, well, you know what? When the male CEOs start wearing high heels, maybe there'll be a good reason for the females, but I haven't noticed it happening.
And I see it
It
on
is.
the detective shows, and I see these women showing up to take care of a dead body. I'm like, there's no way in real life anybody's wearing those shoes.
Well, and if they are, my gosh, yeah, it isn't. My understanding and my experience is that it is very, very unhelpful for the whole of our body. And I know it's a very contentious thing to say because I used to have a shoe collection, not so much high heels, but I loved shoes. But I have now this wonderful relationship with my feet. Um, I do daily foot massages. I look after my feet. Our feet take us everywhere,
Oh,
and
and women
you know,
tuning in, have if you haven't used the magnesium
oh yeah,
lotion on
mm,
on the bottoms of your feet, because
mm,
that, we get the leg aches as we age,
yeah,
right, Leonie
yeah.
Ruth?
Yeah, totally.
and it gets absorbed there, and that can really help. This is amazing. And I also want to talk a little bit more about that interdependence, because I live in New England, and New England is renowned for being the place that you show up, and people who are from this other parts of the world, and if you've come here, you know this, you tend to hear, hey, I already have my friends and family, I'm all set.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no room. There's no getting invited. There's no inclusion. And for me, and you were talking about this, and listeners who tune in regularly know that I bring this up quite often, which is I wanted community. That was really important to me. And I didn't see where it was happening. So I created one. As did you with your Pomegranate Circle. I created the New England Podcasters group because podcasters are so much fun to hang out with. And what I learned is folks were willing to drive from Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont to Massachusetts, where I'm having these meetings, because they want to see each other in person. They want to have that brain melt that happens, that special thing that happens when we can meet in person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I just pick up on that. Yes, if we don't have our needs being met, look at what it is. And if it's not there, then just start it,
And that's what you learned when you went
on.
on LinkedIn, right? That's what you learned when you went on LinkedIn. You found my community, my
Well, I
people.
didn't. It's not what I expected at all, but it's what I found, which has been brilliant. But also for anything, if you're somewhere and there isn't a book club and you love a certain type of books, well, start a book. Go to your local library and say, I'm starting a book club on whatever it is, and people put a notice up, and people come. We have, despite the cultural messages, we do have a very strong, deep, innate need for connection. And the more we listen to the stories, and I do feel for people who say, look, I've got my friends and my community, and I've had it said to me too. And I'm like, well, bully for you, that's great. But you do need to realize that often people are snatched out of that environment and put somewhere else through all sorts of reasons, or you can be in that environment and your friends all die or move away and you're sitting there like a shag on a rock. What are you going to do then? And what happens to your ability to actually have a conversation with somebody that doesn't necessarily know all your friends and all your background? Just being able to start a howdy doodle, that's a really important thing to do, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And some of us had to leave our toxic family of origin, or had to leave toxic friend relationships and start anew. I mean, so many people stay in tough situations because they're afraid of finding that connection elsewhere. They want to stay with the devil they know, right, Leonie-Ruth?
Very, very true. And that is another thing I think about this stage. In fact, I wrote down a couple of thoughts, thinking we have to be sage about our stage we're in. And
all right, getting the clappers out, everybody. Hold on, say that one more time.
I've got another one too that might be clapper worth, but we'll just talk about sage about the stage. Because if we are surrounded by negativity, if we are in toxic relationships, places and spaces that don't value us and encourage us to be who we are, then that is actually impacting our mental and physical well-being. We're not going to flourish. And if you're not flourishing, you're probably languishing, which means you're pretty much dying. And that's what that I have to say is what a lot of society expects us to be doing. You're just kind of toddling off. Well, no, we want to be flourishing, because here's the thing. Intergenerational relationships are vitally important for absolutely everybody. Yes. And if you are in communicating and in relationships and connection only with people in your same stage of life, yes, you need those peer supports for understanding, but you don't have actually other wisdoms and reflections. You don't have younger people bringing in extra energy. So even if you're in that stage of and I'll use the example of parenting, because people often think, oh, that's, that's where you are, that's where you'll be. Yeah, but younger people coming in, teenagers coming in and helping you with your household chores because you're sleep deprived. Older women who've been there saying to you, yeah, honey, we know what it's like. Yep. But you know what? you actually do get there and remember this is a precious time, or whatever it is, just
Right.
or coming and holding the baby, or folding your helping folding the diapers or doing the laundry. But in each stage you go through, you need the people who've been before you and the people coming up behind you. We are otherwise we're not a society. What
We're a
we are
fabric.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's terribly important. The other thing that I think is terribly important about being sage about our stage is to take care about repair, because and I think Judith was talking about this when she had a hand. In fact, I'm a classical violinist as well. That's another reason I resonated with Judith. And at age 60, I stood in my we had a music room, and I stood there and I said, all I wanted to do all my life is play the piano. And my father was actually a music professor and a very good pianist. And he decided that my hand was too small to learn the piano, so he put me on the violin. But I love piano. Anyway, so I stood there and I said to myself, well, just do it. So I did. So I've got a beautiful Yamaha C3 Grand in my music room now, and I play piano. But it's by
Aw.
way of saying, and picking up on what Judith said, and what I've experienced myself too, as we get older, or even not get older, at any stage of our life, we have accidents and injuries. We have things that go wrong with our physical body, and there probably isn't a person out there. In fact, the fitter you are, the more injuries you will have had, because you'll have had stress-related injuries. You will have twisted your ankle as you're running your marathon, whatever, whatever. We have to take great care about our repair. And this is something which, in our impatient, immediate gratification world, we forget. Repair often takes time, and you have to put care and effort into it. And the stage that we are in now, over 65s, we actually have to take greater care in order that we repair, in order that we actually are able to flourish and be our very best selves. And so whether it's your dance classes, or for me, it's probably being out in my garden, and I do yoga and all of those things, they're the things that help me to repair. And that's having permission to take care, because they're not the messages we get. And we have to give ourselves permission and each other and encourage each other.
That's right. And we're not talking about just the next peel for your face. We're talking about really honoring your body. And everybody's DNA is different. I know women my age who are playing pickleball and doing, I mean, and there's a woman I was recently introduced to on Instagram who is a ninja warrior, the
Yeah,
oldest competing female ninja warrior at 71.
yeah.
Her body can do that. And that's wonderful. So I don't want you to go and compare and despair while you're taking care about repair.
I'll give the clapper to that. I love it. May I borrow that one, please? That is
Absolutely.
beautiful.
So you have to do what's right for you. For example, I was born skiing and I was a competitive skier. I was captain of my ski team, and, in tennis, very competitive tennis. So of course my body, as Leonie-Ruth was saying, has had its stresses and tears. And so at a certain point I said, I'm complete with skiing. I'm okay with stopping that because I really love hiking. I really love walking, and I don't want to have to do knee replacements just yet. So I made the
Mm,
decision. Same thing with my arms. I'd rather lift some weights and be able to garden and use my body in that way than tennis, because I could feel the strain and the disrepair happening and the stress on my body that, at a certain point, when you have arthritis, when you have some degenerative things happening, you have to be careful about how you go and use this part of your body. So it's just tuning into who you are and what you know about yourself. But I also love that movement. Folks, you can hop on YouTube or TikTok and find great ways to move your body from your chair and still get some heartbeat up, still have some fluidity, moving your arms around, your legs, etc. So if you are challenged physically, there's
yeah,
ways to do that, right, Leonie-Ruth?
absolutely. So don't be caged, full stop. Whether there's just so much we can always do, whether, as you say, whether it's from a chair. But one of the inspirations, or the light bulb moments I had relatively recently, is realizing that whatever stage you are in, if you are under a lot of stress in your work, particularly if you're a high achiever, terribly busy, what I was doing all that and getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going for a run, etc., etc. And what I didn't realize that was that the form of exercising I was doing was actually adding extra stress to my body.
Right.
And I would have been so much better getting up and just doing some relaxation exercises and going for a gentle walk. And this is kind of contrary to a lot of what the health and wellness says, fitness, 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 go, 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 do, be, thump, 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 no pain, no gain, Jane Fonda, whatever. And that, look, if you can do that, and particularly for people who have body shapes and body metabolisms that need that extra oomph, that is terrific. But I've done a lot of Ayurvedic work.
Oh,
Ayurveda is the ancient Indian from the Vedas, and I
yes.
live an Ayurvedic lifestyle, and Ayurveda has different, talk about doshas, which is basically your body type, but it's actually the area of your body type that you need to balance out. So I'm a fairly thin person and high energy and talk very quickly. And I'm sorry, listeners, if I've been talking too quickly. It's because I'm so excited to be here with Ande. But my dosha needs calming down and grounding and settling. And I didn't realize this until relatively recently in my 60s. And now that I have realized that, I'm like, oh, sometimes I go for a walk run. I'll start walking and I think, oh, I'll go for a bit of a run. And sometimes my body keeps on running and keeps, and I'm surprised. I'm like, oh, it really wants to run today. Sometimes it just wants a gentle walk. And so that's what I say about being sage about your stage,
Yes.
tuning in to our bodies and seeing what does it need today? Do I need to do something to get the adrenaline going and to actually level up my energy? And if I'm feeling, and sometimes I do, I feel a little bit downcast, or there's sorrowful and sadness happening in my life, then I will sometimes find that I'll tune in, and either my body says, no, just go slowly today, just care for yourself. Or actually, girlie, it'd be really good to get out there. And funnily enough, I run between the duck and the chook enclosure in the morning in the cold. And it's about 20 meters. But I find that just enough to kind of, oh, I feel alive again. And we not only need to be connected with nature, with ourselves, and with each other, but the connection, and I forgot what I was going to say then. Hang on a minute. Oh, the connection within our own bodies, between our mind, our heart, our soul, and our spirit.
Right.
We've been taught that we look at the physical. We've been taught we look at the mental. We've been taught that we look at the emotional. But in fact, they're all interwoven. So when we feel physically down, we sometimes can do something physically to help ourselves feel emotionally better, and vice versa. So
Right.
we realizing, growing older and sager and wiser, realizing the impact of one part. And if, at this stage of our life, we do have a lot more grief and loss. There's huge things that we grieve. I would like to be able to run and swim like I did when I was 30. I would like to be doing those things, but it's okay that I can't. But pretending that it's not happening doesn't help. And being able to sit with that and name it. It's a loss. It's a grief.
Oh,
Um,
I am so
he,
happy that you brought that up, Leonie-Ruth. It is true. And any listeners who are going through that, let us know in the comments how you
mm,
are grieving, because
yep,
it is a loss when the body can't see, hear, perform, do all the things that it used to do,
yep.
and you're not going to get it back. And
No,
there's a
no,
transformation that takes place, right?
totally. And here's the thing where I said, don't be caged by that though. Yes, look, at the moment, I've just lost my mum.
Sorry.
My husband's going through some major physical illness things. There's been quite a lot of sorrows. My cat's terminally, a whole
Oh,
lot of things in my life all at once.
mhm.
And sometimes there's a little voice that says, oh, just give up, just stop your work, just whatever. No way. Embracing that and bringing that with who I am into the space that I am bringing in self-compassion and
Mhm.
thinking, yeah, you know what? This is a hard time. Self-compassion is like a balm to the soul. It's an adaptogen. It recognizes what needs to happen inside of us, whether it's comfort, whether it's consolation, whatever. Self-compassion comes in there, forgiveness, acceptance, all of those things. It covers that. And then it enables us to rise again, a bit like the phoenix. But we don't necessarily rise in the same iteration every time. So if you speak to me in 10 years' time, I may have some of my faculties now that I don't have then. But that doesn't mean that I won't be doing what I want to be doing.
And
And
the
yeah,
beauty of that self-compassion, Leonie-Ruth, is that it helps you dissolve the self-shame and blame that you'll put on
totally,
yourself
totally.
and
Yeah,
those voices. It helps, you certainly are walking with fear, doubt, blame, shame, all of that,
yeah,
but they are going to be quieter when you have compassion and when you're able to tell those voices,
totally.
I
You,
know. Uh,
we've been brought up to beat ourselves up.
yeah.
To beat ourselves up because we're not perfect. Well, that's a story that was going nowhere because none of us are perfect. And the sooner you realize perfection is never attainable, and actually it's not desirable. When I was in Japan, I studied flower arranging, and one of the tea ceremony and calligraphy, and one of the threads through all of those Japanese arts is that you always have something of imperfection there. And I'm sure that many of your listeners will know the story about the Zen rock gardens, and the Zen master is talking to the novice, and he says, now you need to rake the garden and rake up all the leaves. And he does it, and it's perfect. And he comes out, and there's not a leaf in sight. And the Zen master shakes his head and said, no, no, no. You look at nature. There's always a leaf. There's always something out of place. I'm like, yep, that's it. And that was the same in calligraphy and in the tea ceremony and in the flower arranging. And so in the flower arranging, the ikebana that I studied was, they had three branches. One was heaven, one was earth, and one was man, humans. And that they were in a special relationship. But the three main pieces of branches were in, and then you added in other branches in different ways to mimic what nature does. So looking at the way plants grow, you created something of a flower arrangement that was representative of nature, but it was from as an artist. And that concept that there was always something that was less than perfect was such an important lesson to learn.
Oh, I
And
love
of
that.
course, yep,
Because I like messy bouquets. I like messy gardens. I like
yeah,
everybody you sort of blooming and doing their thing.
precisely. Well, the property that I live in is called Tanglewood, which I know is somewhere close by to where you live.
That's right.
And but I chose the name because I like the concept of a wood, and I like the concept of a tangle. So we have neighbours who have very neatly trimmed lawns and hedges and whatever, but our place you recognise because my husband said, well, we're called Tanglewood. I'm like, we developed it, we started it during a 20-year drought. So it was an aspirational title during the drought. It was hard yakka getting it going during the drought. But now it is a bit of a tanglewood. I'm like, yep, it's definitely Tanglewood.
Oh my gosh. And listeners, we haven't even hit on exactly the what Leonie-Ruth is doing. So please let everybody know how they can connect with you, how they can follow you, and how they can participate and learn more about Pomegranate Circle. Share all the things.
Thank you. Pomegranate Circle is my passion. I chose the name pomegranate because pomegranate is a symbol around the world for life, for regeneration, for fertility. And I work specifically with women, helping women to flourish. I do mentoring to flourish. I do women's circles, and I write. So on my website, I write blogs. I do regular posts on LinkedIn, articles there. And this year was my year for speaking. So I have done a lot of public speaking earlier on in my career, mentioning that with young women, etc. But I thought, you know what? I think the speaking I want to do is on podcasts and sharing in that way. So this year's my podcast year. So that's the Pomegranate Circle, my website. I'm sure you can pop that into the show notes so people can see me there. If you would love to connect on LinkedIn, and this is one thing I want to say to people in our stage of life, don't think LinkedIn isn't for you. There are so many of us out there. And there is also, particularly in the States, a wonderful movement amongst geriatricians. There's a wonderful woman you have there called Dr. Tracy Gendron, who's written a book called Ageism Unmasked, a must read. And there's, in North America generally, Dr. Rose Jowdry, who works up in Canada. These women are changing the face of geriatrics. They're changing the face of understanding what it means to be in this stage of our life and this journey of our life, and supporting from the medical side what's happening. And I've connected with these people, and because I think the medical system is quite inculcated with the ageist stories and ageism, which is, and I know you've mentioned this, and that's one of the things we face. But seeing these, and it's mostly women, these women blazing the trail to change that narrative on behalf of us and the future generations is really heartwarming. So go onto LinkedIn, just ask to connect with me, and I'd love to connect with you. We can have these conversations. And the more of us that are on LinkedIn, the greater the presence that we have, bringing our wealth of experience, just
Right.
commenting on other people's posts, younger women's posts, younger people's posts, people. And there is an interesting trend on LinkedIn where particularly solopreneurs, people working on their own business, small business people, are becoming more and more evidence, as well as alongside the big corporates. But we are the ones who I've noticed are actually sharing from a place of genuine connection,
Yeah.
of raw vulnerability, and telling it like it is. And the young women are leading the way. I mean, they're now talking about periods and all sorts of things that we
Oh,
wouldn't have
yeah.
even mentioned in public, and they're doing it. Menstruating and periods in the workplace, let's have it for all sorts of things. So being connected with this younger cohort coming through is inspirational, but also being able to reach out, and when a woman would post and talking about the struggles of working and parenting and etc., and being able to connect and say, sister, you're doing a great job, and remember what you're doing isn't easy, and they get back to me and say thank you so much. So
And
I
you brought up,
if
yeah, that point about comment marketing. I
Yep,
call it, it's commenting, but it's comment marketing too, and it's building connections as well.
yep,
So,
yep,
listeners, if you're out there and you want to have more connections, comment. You don't have to create content.
totally, totally.
Commenting is
Yep.
just as powerful, if not more. And also comment on someone else's comment, because that's where you're going
Yes.
to find the connection. Is you might have
Yep.
someone that you follow and revere, but hop in there, certainly share your comment and feedback, but then look
Yep.
at the other ones commenting and comment on there, and build some interesting relationships that way.
Totally. So for people that are thinking, oh, I could never go and do that, that's so scary. Go on, get your profile. If you want some help, I will help you pro bono. I'm just so evangelical about this. I really wanted to happen. So contact me and I'll tell you. But the biggest point is read what people say, and then look and see who else is in. Find a post you like, someone you like, you follow. Look at who else is liking it. Then you can check them out, and
Right.
just, you don't even have to connect, just follow them. So you can almost instantly connect in a way that through your feed, when you just open up, comes a whole lot of stuff you're interested in, a whole lot of people. You find your tribe, you're on the same page, and then that just
And,
grows and
and
grows. And
listeners, I always tell the story when I did my post, when I came out at 66 with my age, about the gentleman who left a comment who was 90. And my first thought was, what the heck are you doing on LinkedIn at 90? I had to check my own bias. He was thriving,
totally,
having the best time ever. He's on like a
totally.
sixth business,
Yeah.
whatever.
And I
It's
think maybe
it's
that's the last
ageless.
thing. Yeah, maybe that's the last thing I want to say. We have to be kind to ourselves, realizing that we have been brought up with a bias, which is now working against ourselves. And if we're women, we've had a bias, we've had internalized sexism as a bias, and now internalized ageism as a bias. So that is one of the reasons that I specifically work with women, because I feel that there's I'm a woman and I understand, but also there's just so much we can do. And thirdly, women support women in a most beautiful way.
Right.
And it's something that we tend to do naturally. And when that's beaten out of us, that's when we have to stop and look at ourselves. If we're the sort of women that are judging other women and putting them down, we have to think, hang on, where did that come from? I'm sorry, that's from the patriarchy. That's the way
Yes.
they do. That's testosterone stuff. Let's do a little bit of a check-in, girls, and that's not the way we do it. And coming from an abundance mindset, there is place for us all. There is space for us all. Doing it together, holding hands and holding that up and becoming a field of flourishing women. That is my vision. Flourishing women of all ages and stages.
Oh, I love that, something fierce. And women empowering women, whatever that walk of life looks like, and cheering each other on and celebrating our
Mm,
walk It's so important. Leonie-Ruth, thank you so much for your time, for your presence, for your wisdom, your insights. You took us on such a wonderful journey today. Yeah, the time has flown by. And listeners, my podcasts are usually, anywhere from 35 to 40 minutes, but this one's going to be almost a full hour because Leonie had so many interesting stories to share, sisterhood moments, as well as her own progress that she's made to help her understand how she can better serve the world and be fully expressed. Leonie-Ruth, I'm so grateful you joined me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm just going to throw this out there and be a real rebel and say maybe I could come back some other time and talk about the fact that I have only recently been discovered that I'm ADHD, and I now run a podcast called ADHD Women Exploring the Universe. So we can have a stage 2 sometime, because there is a lot of us in our stage learning about neurodiversity, and I'd like to chat about that too.
Oh, well, that's a favorite topic of mine. I live with neurodiverse people, and I have served many folks who are in the neurodiverse world, and I love how those brains work. I really do. And that's where the self-care really comes in and the emotional literacy comes in, because so many folks who are on the spectrum have had to learn to articulate what they are going through. It's just wonderful. Yes, you can count on that happening.
Thanks.
Listeners,
We'll leave that as a cliffhanger for the
yeah, that's right. You'll see
time.
Leonie-Ruth will come back again. And be sure to click on those links and follow and connect with Leonie-Ruth Acland. Did I say your last name correctly?
Acland.
Acland. Thank you. Leonie-Ruth Acland. Everywhere she glows. And as always, I got to do my closing here. Remember, you have so much to give. You are so unique. You are so beautiful in so many ways. The world is not done with you yet until you take your last breath. We want to know how you think, how you feel, how you glow in the world. There are opportunities to pursue new dreams. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be one intention, okay, that you have. You can and are worthy of pursuing that and finding opportunities for you for deeper connection. So please know that I'm here. Leonie-Ruth is here. All the guests here are holding hands with you as you age and celebrate your age out loud. Until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Cheers from Boston. Mwah! And from Australia. Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you. It refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.